Yo, what is up guys? So a bunch of new Yu-Gi-Oh cards are coming out into the game, and obviously when you play in real life or if you're playing on that young dueling book, there's a lot of people that will argue about certain rulings, and a bunch of new rulings came out, and I think it's really good for some of us to brush up on some of that knowledge here in Yu-Gi-Oh. Now I will be linking my source down below for all of these rulings and stuff, but I'm going to give you guys like the condensed version and kind of going more so over just blanket effects, meaning that they're going to cover a lot of other cards that could be also in the future, rather than going over every single like scenario, because some of these scenarios are like really conditional and they're playing cards that nobody's playing. It's just more so, what if this happens? I'm just going to go over again the cards that I think most of us will be seeing play when we're actually playing Yu-Gi-Oh! So anyways, the first card that we're going to be talking about is Selective Reborn, which is a new card. It actually was formerly known as Sponsored Reborn, and we actually just got regular Monster Reborn here in the TCG, and that is something that, again, this is a blanket effect, so that kind of covers Monster Reborn as well, because it's coming back into the game, or it came back into the game. But anyways, yeah, Selective Reborn, let's go over its effect real quick, and I'll explain the ruling on it. So Selective Reborn says target 3 monsters in your graveyard. Your opponent chooses one of those monsters for you to special summon. If you do, banish the remaining monsters. You can only activate 1 Selective Reborn per turn. So the argument would be that you target 3 monsters, and this is how people were arguing before. It was that you would target 2 monsters that were not able to be special summoned, meaning the summoning conditions aren't met yet, or it was never special summoned properly, or you're just not allowed to select those 2 monsters, and then you would select 1 appropriate target. And then since your opponent chooses one of them to be special summoned, it would force them to select that monster, or none at all, which wouldn't make any sense, because why would you do that in the first place? Your opponent would just go super minus, or I guess you would go super minus if you're just like, I'm going to target these 2 cards that I can't get and 1 target that I can get. What are you giving me? And they just say, well, I'm going to select the one you can't get, and you get nothing. I don't know why someone thought that was a thing, but that apparently people come up with crazy ideas, alright? Then the other argument was, I'm going to select 2 cards that I can't summon and 1 card that I can summon, so you have to give me the card that I can summon. Because it technically doesn't say 3 monsters that you can special summon. It just says 3 monsters. You just target 3 monsters in your graveyard. Your opponent chooses one of them for you to special summon. So what it comes down to, guys, as far as the ruling goes. Now, I'll also leave this down below in the description box, because there's a lot of a lot of things to discuss. So, some monsters can only be special summoned by a certain condition, and they cannot be special summoned by other ways. Now, other monsters must be first special summoned by a certain effect, and you can actually get them out. A lot of the things like synchros, if they're not special summoned properly, you could not actually select them as a target. So, if their summon was negated, if they never came out properly, they would not be appropriate targets for either Monster Reborn or Selective Reborn. So those would not be appropriate targets, therefore you cannot select them. Again, there's a lot of discussion in this, but to really sum it up over here, you can't target things that you cannot summon. So basically, the card is worse in a sense, or better if you thought that you could target 2 monsters that you couldn't summon, and then 1 that you could, and your opponent would give you a card that you could not normally summon, because it doesn't ignore summoning conditions. Now, there are cards that do ignore summoning conditions, but that's not this card, so we're not going to get into that. But yeah, I'll leave this also down below, just if you want to read into it. But basically, some monsters can only be special summoned by one specific way, and they cannot be special summoned by other ways. Some cards will actually say this, and some other cards are just too old, and they just kind of were like, well, if it hasn't had a reprint, well, too bad, that's just how the card works. So just keep that in mind too. It applies to a lot of older cards in the game. Alright, next up. Now the Troymare Griffin has a few different effects, but we are just really here for the other effect on the very bottom. So I'm not going to read the full effect, but if you want to, by all means, you can pause the video, read the full effect. I'm just here to give you guys, again, the condensed versions, because some of these will actually cover other cards as well. So anyways, Troymare Griffin is a link monster, and it has the effect of special summon monsters cannot activate their effects unless they are linked. Now, the example they gave was Link Haribo. So Link Haribo has the effect where when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you contribute this card to change that opponent's monster's attack to 0 until the end of this turn. And then if it's in your graveyard as a quick effect, it has this other thing. But we're really here just for that effect of tributing it and also making its attack 0. Like I said, special summon monsters cannot activate their effects unless they are linked. So the important part with this ruling over here, again, this was like their exact ruling. Where is it? This one over here. So, as linked to it could activate effect? The answer is yes. You can still activate a tribute, its effect, but obviously Link Reborn has like another effect. But again, we're really here just for that effect of it being linked, because this is something you can apply to other things. The reason why it was up for like argument is because the card would not be there, therefore it would not be linked, and it does say you tribute this card. Then it has a semicolon. Change that opponent's monster's attack to 0 until the end of this turn. So basically, to sum it up over here, you can still activate things that would be linked at the moment if it would, let's say, be tributed, because again, it would be off the field. Therefore, some cards are just like that, though. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh, as I'm sure some of you guys know, it is a very complex game. Anyways, next up over here, Vampire Sucker. So this requires 2 zombie monsters, and anyways, it says if you would tribute a monsters for a tribute summon, you can tribute a zombie monster or monsters your opponent controls as if you control it. You can only use each effect for the following effects once per turn, but we're really here just for the effect of if you tribute a monster or monsters. The question was on this is, can you use multiple monsters that your opponent controls? And yeah, it actually does work like that. So if your opponent has several different, like let's say if they have 5 monsters and one card requires, let's say, 5 zombie monsters to summon it, yeah, you could use all of them because it does include monsters. I thought that was pretty self-explanatory because of the monsters, but I figured this would be a card that might come up here because we are getting more vampire support. I don't know if people will be playing this, but technically, yeah, it could be a card that you might actually want to use. I don't know if zombies are going to be good, or, well, zombies / vampires, but yeah, you can use multiple. All right, next one up is kind of interesting. This one, I was actually wondering myself. So, Chimera Tech Mega Fleet Dragon is a fusion monster, and it requires 1 Cyber Dragon monster plus 1 monsters in the extra monster zone. And the question was, could you use your pendulum monsters for this? And what's interesting with this, well, let me read the full effect. So it says it cannot be used as fusion material. It must be first special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards from either field to the graveyard. You do not use polymerization. And then the attack, well, that's irrelevant. We're talking about summoning condition because it requires plus 1 monsters in the extra monster zone, meaning in the actual extra monster zone. But it cannot actually include pendulums, which I thought was interesting because if it was special summoned by, whatever, pendulum scale or however you got that monster, it's because the actual pendulum monster doesn't actually go to the graveyard, because it does say above cards from either field to the graveyard. And I thought that the monsters would just therefore go to the graveyard, but that's not actually how it works. Again, if you want to read the full thing, I'll link this thing, but yeah, that's actually really interesting. You cannot use pendulums, because I was thinking before they'd be in the pendulum area, so I don't know how it would have been ruled back then, but it's irrelevant, because again, it would still have to go to the graveyard apparently, and that's how it works. I'm wondering if there's something where, like, if things cannot go to the extra deck, would you be able to activate this card? like if there's some obscure card that says like the pendulums instead go to the graveyard, right? Could you then finally use this? I mean, I know it's probably going to be irrelevant because, well, who's playing a Chimera Tech Mega Fleet Dragon? But yeah, it's just, again, it could be a blanket effect for any future things that where they need to actually send them from the field to the graveyard. And if they can't hit the graveyard, it will not actually be an appropriate target, which, again, I was super surprised by that. But anyways, that's it for the rulings. Like I said, there are some more really obscure ones, but I wanted to go over the ones I thought were really important. That some people, they have arguments, so it's good to try to solve these. And again, I'll leave my source down below. And anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the vid. If it helped you out, or if you learned something new, drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. I always try to keep you guys up to date with some rulings, but you guys know Yu-Gi-Oh is a very complex game, so sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, even for myself. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I am signing out.